The psychology of the so-called people-pleasing person is someone who no one tried to please for themselves, right? In other words, they were in an asymmetrical relationship, probably with a caregiver or parent, who didn't care about their feelings, they didn't prioritize their needs, etc. And they had to adjust to them. So, if you've got a parent with a volcanic temper where anything might set them off, well, what you say or think is going to disappear completely, because all you're going to be doing as a child is managing the mood of a parent. They will be an infant, essentially, and you will have to be in the parenting role, and you'll have to put aside your needs. And children are great geniuses at reading the room and doing what needs to be done to survive. It's a survival strategy. I will become a people pleaser, not in order to annoy people in later life, but in order to survive.
Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. Are you a good person? Or are you just a person who's afraid of being seen as bad? Because I've been thinking about this lately, about how we praise certain people. She's so nice. She never says no to anyone. He's a saint, always available. She never complains about anything. And I started wondering, is that kindness, or is that something else? I think most people assume it's the same thing. That being unable to say no is just being generous. That being always available is just being caring. That never complaining is just being positive. But I don't think it is. I think there's a difference. A big one. And I think Carl Jung understood this difference better than almost anyone. So let me make a distinction that might be uncomfortable. Real kindness is a choice. You have the ability to say no, to set a boundary, to walk away. And you choose not to. You choose to give. You choose to help. You choose to be there. That's kindness. It comes from strength. But there's another thing that looks exactly like kindness from the outside. It's called people-pleasing. And it's not a choice. It's a compulsion. You don't say yes because you want to. You say yes because you can't bear the thought of saying no. Because the idea of someone being upset with you feels like death. Because somewhere deep inside, you learned that your safety depends on other people being happy with you. And here's the thing that nobody wants to hear. If you don't have the ability to say no, your yes means nothing. It's not a gift. It's not generosity. It's a reflex, a spasm of fear dressed up as virtue. Jung had this quote that I keep coming back to. He said, "I'd rather be whole than good." And I think that's what this is about. The people pleaser isn't whole. They've cut off a part of themselves. The part that says no. The part that gets angry. The part that has limits. And they think that makes them good. But it doesn't. It makes them incomplete. And that incompleteness has consequences. But before I go further, I want to make something clear. If you recognized yourself in what I just said, this isn't your fault. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be this way. This was installed in you, probably very early, probably before you were old enough to question it. So let me explain where this comes from, because understanding the origin is the first step to changing it. When you were a child and you felt threatened, your brain had a few options. You could fight back, but you were too small. You could run away, but where would you go? You could freeze, just shut down and wait for it to pass. But there's a fourth option that most people don't talk about. Psychologists call it the fawn response. Basically, it's the strategy of appeasing the threat, making yourself useful, making yourself small, making yourself whatever the threatening person needs you to be, so they'll stop being threatening. And for a lot of kids, this was the only option that worked. Think about it. If you grew up with a parent who was unpredictable, sometimes loving, sometimes angry, and you never knew which one you'd get, you learned to read the room before you even walked in. You learned to sense the mood. You learned to adjust yourself to whatever would keep things calm. You know that kid who, when the parents are fighting, goes to clean their room without anyone asking? They're not being mature. They're not being responsible. They're trying to control the chaos by being invisible, by being perfect, by being so useful that maybe the storm will pass them by. Or maybe it wasn't anger. Maybe it was criticism. A parent who was never satisfied, who always found something wrong, who made you feel like you had to earn your place in the family every single day. I think about kids who bring home a 95 on a test, and the first question is, what happened to the other 5 points? Kids who learn that nothing is ever quite good enough. That approval has to be earned again and again and again. These kids grow up to be adults who don't know how to rest, who feel guilty when they're not productive, who always feel like they should be doing more, giving more, being more, because relaxation feels dangerous. Like if you stop performing, even for a moment, the approval will be withdrawn. Or maybe it was neglect, emotional absence, a parent who was physically there but never really present, never really interested, never really seeing you. And you learned that the only way to get attention, to get love, to get seen was to be useful, to be helpful, to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to make yourself indispensable. Because if you're indispensable, they can't ignore you. If you're useful, you matter. If you're essential to the family's functioning, you have a right to exist. Whatever the specific flavor, the lesson was the same. Your brain learned an equation, a survival equation. Love equals usefulness. If I am useful, I won't be abandoned. If I don't cause problems, I will be loved. If I make myself indispensable, I will be safe. And here's the thing. For a child, this makes perfect sense. It's adaptive. It's smart. It's survival. The problem is that your brain doesn't automatically update when you grow up. That equation is still running in the background. Even now, even when you're an adult, with your own life, your own choices, your own power, somewhere inside, there's still a part of you that believes, if I stop being useful, I will be abandoned. If I say no, I will be rejected. If I show who I really am, I will be alone. And so you keep performing, keep adjusting, keep saying yes when you want to say no. Keep smiling when you want to scream. Not because you're weak, because you're running on old software. You know that feeling when you're about to set a boundary with someone and suddenly your heart starts racing. Your palms get sweaty. There's this sense of impending doom, like something terrible is about to happen. That's your nervous system reacting like you're a child again. Like saying no is going to result in abandonment. Like the person is going to stop loving you if you don't give them what they want. And rationally, you know that's not true. You're an adult. You'll survive if someone is upset with you. But the body doesn't know that. The body is still running the old program. This is why people-pleasing is so hard to change. It's not just a habit. It's wired into your nervous system. It feels like life or death because, at some point in your development, it was. So here's where Carl Jung comes in. And I think he understood something about this that most people don't want to hear. Jung had this concept called the shadow. And basically, the shadow is everything about yourself that you've repressed. Everything you've decided is unacceptable. Your anger, your selfishness, your desires, your limits. Most people think that if you repress something, it goes away. Like, if you never express anger, you become a person without anger. If you never say no, you become a person without limits. If you always put others first, you become truly selfless. Jung would say, that's not how it works. What you repress doesn't disappear. It goes into the basement. And down there, in the dark, it grows. So let me ask you something. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, where does that no go? You might think it just dissolves. You swallow it and it's gone. But it's not gone. It's deposited somewhere into what I think of as a resentment bank. Every forced yes is a deposit. Every boundary you don't set is a deposit. Every time you say it's fine when it's not fine, that's a deposit too. And this bank accumulates interest, compound interest, and eventually the bill comes due. Maybe it shows up as physical symptoms, chronic back pain, headaches, fatigue that doesn't go away no matter how much you sleep, jaw pain from clenching your teeth at night, your body holding the tension that you won't let yourself express. I've talked to people who went to doctor after doctor trying to figure out why they were exhausted all the time. Nothing wrong on the tests. Everything looked fine. And eventually, someone asked them, "Are you angry about something? Is there something you're not saying?" And they realized they'd been swallowing rage for years, and it was living in their body, making them sick. Maybe it shows up as passive aggression. You're not angry, no, you're never angry. But somehow you're always running late when you're supposed to meet that person. Somehow you keep forgetting the things they asked you to do. Somehow there's always a little edge of sarcasm in your voice. You know what passive aggression really is? It's aggression that's too scared to be direct. It's the shadow leaking out sideways because you won't let it out straight. Maybe it shows up as sudden explosions. You know that person who's sweet, 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 and then one day loses it over something tiny. And everyone's shocked because that's so unlike them. I had a friend like this. Nicest guy you'd ever meet. Always accommodating. Never complained. Then one day, someone at work moved his coffee mug and he absolutely lost it. I mean, screaming, red in the face. Years of rage pouring out. Everyone thought he was crazy, but he wasn't crazy. He just hit the limit. The resentment bank overflowed. And all those years of "it's fine" came pouring out at once. It wasn't about the coffee mug. It was never about the coffee mug. It was about the 10,000 times he'd said yes when he meant no. The 10,000 boundaries he hadn't set. The 10,000 moments when he'd swallowed his truth to keep the peace. Maybe it shows up as depression. There's a theory that depression is anger turned inward. You can't direct it at the people who deserve it, so you direct it at yourself. You become the target of your own rage. The people pleaser who's depressed might not look angry. They look sad, hopeless, empty. But underneath that emptiness is often a mountain of unexpressed fury that has nowhere to go. The thing about repression is that it doesn't prevent expression. It just delays it. And when it finally comes out, it comes out distorted, misdirected, often aimed at the wrong people, often disproportionate to whatever triggered it. Jung said, "What you resist persists." The anger you don't allow yourself to feel doesn't become peace. It becomes a monster in the basement. And monsters in the basement don't stay in the basement forever. There's a quote from Jung that I keep coming back to. He said, "I'd rather be whole than good." And I think this is the key to understanding what people-pleasing actually costs you. To be good in the people-pleaser's sense means to cut off parts of yourself. Your anger, your limits, your no, your ability to disappoint people. These are all amputated in the name of being nice. But Jung would say that those parts aren't bad. They're necessary. They're part of being a complete human being. Think about it. Your anger tells you when something is wrong, when a boundary has been crossed. when you're being mistreated. Without access to your anger, you have no alarm system. You can't tell when something is a threat because you've disabled the part of you that would recognize it. Your ability to say no is your ability to have a self. If you can't say no, you can't define where you end and another person begins. You become a person without edges. A person who can be pushed and pushed and pushed because there's no point where you push back. Your capacity to disappoint people is your capacity to be real. Real people disappoint others sometimes. Real people can't meet every need, fulfill every expectation, be everything to everyone. If you can't tolerate disappointing people, you can't be a real person. You can only be a performance. Being whole means having access to all of these parts. It means having teeth, as I like to think of it. Not so you can bite everyone, but so you have the option. So when you choose to be gentle, it's a choice, not a lack of alternatives. A dog without teeth isn't gentle. It's defenseless. A dog with teeth that chooses not to bite, that's gentle. The people pleaser has no teeth, and they think that makes them good. But it doesn't. It makes them prey. Okay, so here's where it gets uncomfortable, because I need to talk about something that nobody wants to hear. If you're a people pleaser, you probably have a history of relationships with certain kinds of people. Difficult people, demanding people, people who seem to drain you, people who never seem satisfied no matter how much you give. You call them energy vampires. You call them narcissists. And maybe they are. But let me ask you something. Why is your door unlocked? See, I think there's a pattern here that most people pleasers don't want to look at. They focus on the toxic person. Why are they like this? Why do they do this to me? Why can't they be different? But they don't look at the other half of the equation. Why do I keep finding myself here? Why do I keep attracting this? What is it about me that draws this pattern? And I want to be careful here because I'm not blaming you. I'm not saying it's your fault that someone mistreated you. But I am saying there's a dynamic. And understanding the dynamic is the only way to change it. Here's how it works. A narcissist, or any kind of emotional predator really, needs something very specific. They need someone without boundaries. Someone who lives to validate others. Someone who won't say no. A people pleaser needs something too. They need someone to give them a mission. Someone to save. Someone who tells them what to do so they don't have to figure out what they actually want. These two needs fit together like puzzle pieces. The key and the lock. It's perfect, perfectly destructive. The toxic person tests a small boundary first. They're late. They criticize something. They ask for a bit more than is reasonable. The people pleaser caves. To keep the peace. To not make a big deal. The toxic person registers this. Interesting. The door is open. So they push again. A little further this time. And again, the people pleaser caves. And again, and again. Until the toxic person is living inside them, taking everything. And the people pleaser doesn't know how it got to this point. But it didn't happen suddenly. It happened one unchallenged boundary at a time. One swallowed no at a time. One, it's fine at a time. Here's a way I think about it. Toxic people aren't masterminds breaking into a fortress. They're opportunists looking for an open door, and a people pleaser is a house with no walls. They consume you because you trained them to consume you. Every time you apologized for something you didn't do, you taught them that your dignity is negotiable. Every time you said, "It's fine," when it wasn't fine, you taught them that your pain doesn't matter. The vampire doesn't respect the blood donor. He feeds. And when the donor is dry, he moves on. And I know this is hard to hear because it feels like I'm blaming you, and I'm not. You didn't choose this dynamic. You were conditioned into it. But now that you're an adult, you're the only one who can change it. And the first step is seeing the pattern clearly, even when it's painful to see. Okay, now the hardest part, the part I almost didn't include because it feels too heavy, but I think it needs to be said. People pleasing isn't just a defense mechanism. It isn't just a trauma response. It's also a form of manipulation. I know, that sounds wrong. How is it manipulation? I'm the one who gives everything. I'm the one who sacrifices. I'm the victim here. And yes, you give, you sacrifice. That's true. But why? Think about it for a moment. When you do something you don't want to do to please someone, what do you want in return? You want them to like you. You want them not to be angry. You want them not to abandon you. You want them to see you as a good person. That's not a gift. That's a transaction. You're buying their approval with your submission. You're paying with your compliance for something you want to receive. Let me give you an example. Someone asks you to help them move on your only day off. You really, really don't want to. You're exhausted. You had plans. You need that day. But you say yes. And you tell yourself it's because you're generous, because you're a good friend, because that's who you are. But is it? Or is it because you're terrified of what happens if you say no? Because you can't bear the thought of them being disappointed in you? Because you're afraid if you don't show up, they won't like you anymore? If it's the second thing, you're not giving them a gift. You're paying for their approval with your time and energy. You're managing their perception of you by sacrificing yourself. That's not generosity. That's manipulation. You're trying to control how they feel about you. And there's more. You lie. You lie about what you like. You lie about what you feel. You lie about what you want. What do you want to eat? Whatever you want. Are you okay? I'm fine. You're not. Does this bother you? No, not at all. It does. What do you want to do this weekend? I don't care. What do you want to do? You have preferences. You have opinions. You have feelings. But you hide them. Because showing them feels dangerous. Because what if they don't match what the other person wants? What if expressing yourself creates conflict? So you lie. You pretend you don't have needs. You pretend you don't have opinions. You present yourself as this infinitely flexible person who's happy with whatever. But that person doesn't exist. That's a character you're playing. And you're lying to everyone about who you are just to avoid the discomfort of being seen. You know what this creates? Fake relationships with people who don't actually know you. They know your persona, your mask of service, the version of you that was designed to be acceptable. And this is why you feel so lonely, even surrounded by people, even in relationships, even with friends and family who supposedly love you, because nobody knows you. They know the character, and the character is exhausted from existing. Jung wrote a lot about this, about the persona, the social mask. He said it's necessary to some extent. We can't be completely raw with everyone all the time. But when the persona becomes the only thing that exists, you disappear behind it. And here's the terrifying question. If you are what others need you to be, who are you when you're alone? That question haunts me. Because I think there are a lot of people who don't know the answer. Who are you when there's nobody to please? The people pleaser becomes a chameleon. They adapt to the environment, change color depending on who's in the room. With assertive people, they're submissive. With insecure people, they're the strong one. With intellectual people, they're smart. With emotional people, they're sensitive. They're everything. They're nothing. They're whatever is needed. And when they're alone, there's a void, a not knowing who you are. What do I want? I don't know. What do I like? Depends who's asking. Who am I? This void is terrifying, and it's why the people pleaser avoids being alone, avoids silence, because in the silence, they encounter the emptiness. Here's a question that might hurt. If tomorrow everyone in your life disappeared, would you know how to live? Would you know what to do? Would you know who to be? Or have you depended so long on being what others needed that you never discovered what you need? This is what Jung called the loss of self through identification with the persona. You become the mask so completely that there's nothing behind it. Or if there is something, you don't know what it is anymore. And this is perhaps the deepest cost of people pleasing. Not just the exhaustion, not just the resentment, not just the toxic relationships, but the loss of yourself. The realization that you've been performing for so long that you don't know what's real anymore. Okay, so what do we do with all of this? I don't want to end this leaving you worse than you were. So let's talk about the other side, about what Jung called individuation. Individuation isn't about becoming a bad person. It's not about becoming selfish. It's not about telling everyone to go to hell. It's about becoming a whole person, integrating the parts you've hidden, your anger, your limits, your capacity to say no. Jung said the shadow isn't just darkness. There's a lot of power there. Your assertiveness, your strength, your ability to protect yourself. When you repress all of this in the name of being nice, you also repress your capacity to be strong. I like to think of it this way. You need to recover your teeth, not to bite everyone, but to have the option, so that when you choose to be gentle, it's a choice, not a lack of alternatives. So what does this look like in practice? First, let's talk about boundaries, because this is the concrete skill that changes everything. A boundary isn't a wall. It isn't aggression. It isn't, I hate you, stay away. A boundary is simply this: the distance at which I can love you and love myself at the same time. If to be close to you, I have to destroy myself, that distance is wrong. That's all a boundary is. It's not about controlling the other person. It's about defining your own limits, what you will and won't accept, what you need to be okay. Let me give you some examples of what boundaries actually sound like. I can't take on that project right now. Not, I can't take it on, I'm so sorry, I feel terrible. It's just that I have these other things, and I really wish I could, and maybe next time. Just, I can't take that on right now. I'm not available to talk about this. Not an explanation of why. Not a justification. Not a debate about whether your reason is valid. Just, I'm not available for this conversation. That doesn't work for me. Maybe the simplest boundary of all. It doesn't work for you. You don't have to explain why. You don't have to prove it's reasonable. It doesn't work. Full stop. No. The hardest one, and sometimes the only one you need. Here's the thing about boundaries. You don't need to explain them. You don't need to justify them. You don't need to make the other person agree that they're reasonable. I'm not available for that. Full stop. That doesn't work for me. Full stop. No. Full stop. No explanation needed. No debate required. The boundary exists because you say it does. This is incredibly hard for people pleasers, because they've been trained to believe that their needs require justification. that they're only allowed to have limits if they can prove those limits are valid to someone else. But that's not true. You're allowed to have limits just because you have them. You're allowed to say no just because you want to say no. Your needs don't require external approval to be legitimate. And here's something else. Boundaries aren't about changing other people's behavior. They're about defining what you will do. If you keep yelling at me, I'll leave the room. That's a boundary. You're not telling them they can't yell. You're telling them what you'll do if they do. I'm happy to help when you ask respectfully, but I won't respond to demands. That's a boundary. You're defining your terms. I love you, but I won't lend you money again. That's a boundary. It might hurt them. It might make them angry, but you're allowed to have it anyway. Now, I need to warn you about something, because this part is important. When you start setting boundaries, people are not going to like it, especially the people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They're going to say you've changed, that you're selfish now, that you're not the person they knew. And they're right. You have changed. You're becoming real. And the real version of you isn't as convenient as the version that existed to serve. Some people are going to try to guilt you. After everything I've done for you, I thought we were close. You used to be so nice. Some people are going to get angry. How dare you say no to them? Who do you think you are? Don't you know you're supposed to be available whenever they need you? Some people are going to play the victim. You're hurting them by having limits. You're abandoning them by taking care of yourself. Your boundary is an attack on them. And some people are just going to quietly disappear. Because without your unlimited compliance, without your constant availability, without the service you provided, they don't have a reason to be around. This is painful. I won't pretend it's not. Losing people hurts, even when they were people who were using you. But here's what I want you to understand. This is a test. And I don't mean they're consciously testing you. They're just reacting to the loss of something they had. Your endless availability, your unconditional compliance. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. If someone leaves because you set a boundary, they weren't there for you. They were there for what you provided, for your usefulness, for your availability, for the version of you that never caused problems. And that's not a relationship. That's exploitation with a nicer name. I think of it like this. When you start having boundaries, you're basically doing a relationship audit. You're finding out who was there for you and who was there for what they could get from you. The people who stay, who adjust, who respect your limits even when it's inconvenient for them, those people love you. The real you, the one with needs and limits and a self. The people who leave, who get angry, who try to guilt you back into compliance. Those people didn't love you. They loved what you did for them. And there's a big difference. So yes, you'll lose people. But what you'll actually lose is the illusion that those relationships were real. And that's a loss worth experiencing. Real relationships can survive boundaries. Real relationships actually require boundaries. Two people without limits don't have a relationship. They have a fusion, an enmeshment. Neither person can tell where they end and the other begins. Healthy relationships have space, have difference, have the ability for each person to say, this is me, this is what I need, without the other person experiencing that as abandonment. If someone can't tolerate you having limits, they weren't loving you, they were using you, and their departure, however painful, is actually liberation. Here's something else I want to say, because I think it's important. The goal isn't to stop caring about people. The goal isn't to become cold or distant or selfish. The goal is to care about people from a place of wholeness, rather than from a place of fear. There's a huge difference between I'm helping you because I want to, and I'm helping you because I'm terrified of what happens if I don't. The first is generosity. The second is compulsion. The first fills you up. The second drains you. The first creates connection. The second creates resentment. You can still be kind. You can still be generous. You can still show up for people, but you do it because you choose to, not because you're driven by terror of abandonment. And when you can't, when you don't have the capacity, when you need to say no, you can do that too, without guilt, without anxiety, without feeling like you're betraying your fundamental nature. That's freedom. That's what it looks like to be whole instead of just good. Jung spent his entire life studying this journey of becoming who you actually are. He called it individuation, the process of becoming an individual, not an extension of others, not a function, not a utility, a complete human being, with light and shadow, with kindness and teeth, with the capacity to say yes and the capacity to say no. This is the work. It's not easy. It's not quick. And most people don't do it. Most people stay in the performance, stay in the exhaustion, stay in the cycle of giving and resenting and giving more. Because changing is terrifying. Because setting boundaries means risking rejection. Because being real means some people might not like the real you. But here's what I've come to believe. The people who reject the real you were never really with you in the first place. They were with the performance, with the mask, with the useful version of you that didn't cause problems. And losing that isn't actually a loss. It just feels like one because you've been taught that any rejection is catastrophic, that being disliked is the worst thing that can happen. It's not. The worst thing that can happen is living your entire life as someone you're not, getting to the end and realizing you never showed up, that no one ever knew you because you never let them see. That's the real tragedy, not rejection, invisibility, self-imposed invisibility in the name of keeping the peace. So here's where I want to leave you. The price of freedom is the disapproval of others. That's it. That's the price. And you have to decide if you're willing to pay it. You can keep everyone happy. You can keep saying yes. You can keep swallowing your no and depositing it in the resentment bank. You can keep attracting people who drain you because your door is always open. You can do that. A lot of people do. Maybe most people. Or you can start, slowly, imperfectly, to tell the truth about what you want, about what you need, about where your limits are. And some people won't like it, and some people will leave, and it will hurt. But on the other side of that hurt is something remarkable. You, the real one, the whole one, the one who's been hiding behind the mask of service, waiting to be allowed to exist. Jung said, individuation is the central task of human life. Becoming who you actually are, rather than who you think you should be. Integrating the parts you've rejected. Accepting your shadow. Finding the courage to be whole. It's not about being perfect. It's not about being good. It's about being real. And real people have limits. Real people say no. Real people disappoint others sometimes. Real people have teeth. That doesn't make them bad. It makes them complete. So, let me ask you one more time. And maybe the answer is different now than it was at the beginning. Are you a good person? Or are you a person who's been performing goodness because you're terrified of what happens if you stop? If it's the second one, I understand. I've been there. Maybe I'm still there sometimes. It's hard to unlearn survival strategies that kept you safe for so long. But you're not a child anymore. And the equation your brain learned, love equals usefulness, isn't true anymore. It never was, really. It was just what you had to believe to survive. Real love doesn't require you to disappear. Real connection doesn't require you to lie about who you are. Real relationships can hold your no as well as your yes. And if someone can't accept that, if someone needs the performing, compliant, unlimited version of you to stay, let them go. They weren't there for you. They were there for what you provided. And you are so much more than what you provide. You are a person with needs, with limits, with a self that deserves to exist. I know it's scary, the thought of showing up as yourself, with all your limits and needs and imperfections, and not knowing if people will accept you. The thought of risking rejection to be real. But here's what I've learned. The pain of rejection is temporary. The pain of never existing is permanent. You can be rejected and recover. You can lose relationships and find new ones. You can be misunderstood and eventually be seen. But you can't get back the years you spent being someone else. You can't unlive a life that was never yours. You can't recover from never having existed. So take the risk. Set the boundary. Say the no. Show the truth. Some people won't like it. Some people will leave. But the people who stay, who see you, who love the real you with all your edges and limits, those people are worth more than 100 relationships built on performance. And the person you'll finally meet when the mask comes off, the person you've been hiding from everyone including yourself, that person is worth meeting. Let it exist. Finally. For the first time. The world might not applaud, but the world's applause was never worth the price of your soul. Pay the price of disapproval instead. It's the only way home to yourself.